Welcome everyone to our webinar, Funnel Metrics High Performance Marketers Can't Ignore in 2016. Joined with John Donlan from Sirius Decisions, and we're going to start our webinar in just a bit. The webinar, of course, is Funnel Metrics High Performance Marketers Can't Ignore in 2016. Looks like a lot of people are logging on right now, so we'll wait a few minutes and then get started. While we're waiting, we're running a poll, and 84% of you guys that are logged on have responded, and it looks like the winning response to what's your biggest marketing challenge today is increasing conversion rates. So half are saying that increasing conversion rates is your biggest challenge. 25% are saying determining which marketing campaigns are effective. Of course, this is changing as we speak. Welcome everyone to our webinar, Funnel Metrics High Performance Marketers Can't Ignore in 2016. And thanks for participating in our poll. Looks like 75% now have voted. Oh, no, 79% have voted. And still about half are saying increasing conversion rates is your biggest marketing challenge. 30% are saying determine which marketing campaigns are effective. Thanks everyone for voting. We have a very high voting rate, 92%, so thanks for doing that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started, and we'll just do some introductions, and I'm sure there'll be others also logging on, so they'll just catch up. Okay, welcome to our webinar, Funnel Metrics High Performance Marketers Can't Ignore in 2016. I'm Bonnie Crater, CEO of Full Circle Insights, and I'm joined by John Donlan, who is Research Director at Sirius Decisions. Thanks very much for voting in our poll, what's your current biggest marketing issue? The poll is actually now closed, so here are the final results. So 48% said increasing conversion rates is your biggest marketing challenge. And 35% said determining which marketing campaign is effective was second with 35%. And then we had lower numbers, 9% each, for creating new marketing campaigns and then identifying the bottlenecks in my funnel. And that's really interesting for me, the identifying bottlenecks in my funnel, because that's a really big opportunity for increasing conversion rates. So we're going to talk about all that today on our webinar. And here is our agenda. So we're going to do a few introductions, then John's going to talk about diagnosing the lead management process, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about how you use a tool like Full Circle to do that diagnosis, and then we'll have time for questions. So here are our speakers today. As I mentioned, I'm Bonnie Crater, and I'm CEO of Full Circle Insights. And we started our company about 5 years ago because we really wanted to help marketers just get better at their craft. And we felt that if marketers just had better metrics and better insights into what was going on with their campaigns, that could actually make some enormous improvements. And we've seen that over and over again with our customers. So we're really excited that we're helping our colleagues just get better at what they do. So I'm a former 5-time VP of marketing, and that's why I'm very passionate about measuring my marketing. I always wanted to measure my marketing. I didn't have the tools to do it, and that's why we started Full Circle Insights. So John, of course, is joining me. He's from Sirius Decisions. I'm a huge fan of Sirius Decisions because when I first went to their conference, I was so excited because I found a whole group of people that also wanted to measure their marketing. So if you go to their summit, and I recommend this to anybody who's interested in this topic, you really should go to the Sirius Decisions Summit. It's going to be in Nashville again this year, May 24th through the 27th. I always learn something new every time I go. So the Sirius Decisions is not sitting still. They have lots of cool frameworks about how to do better at marketing and deliver all the best practices. It's just a wonderful place to meet other people who are also interested in getting better at their craft. All the top B2B marketers go. So John, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself. What do you do at Sirius Decisions?
Yeah, thanks, Bonnie. And thanks for the good intro, and thanks everybody for tuning in to the webinar. So my role at Sirius Decisions it's a few different things. I am a research director, and I have a focus on the marketing operations service line. So I spend a lot of my time thinking about all things marketing ops. And within that area, I've got a few different areas of specialty that I look at. One is around data management, and you may have tuned into another webinar that I've been on data management, spend a lot of time thinking about that. But then also measurement, so reporting and analytics, And then finally, process improvement. And when we look at the marketing processes that we tackle, the biggest one that we have, and probably the biggest one that goes with sales, is the lead management process. There's a lot that happens in there. So I spend a lot of time working with our clients and writing research around lead management and what organizations can do to improve their lead management process. What I'd like to do now, I think I can start off sharing a little bit of education, a little bit of insight into our approach around the lead management process and some of the things that you can do to start to diagnose what's going on inside your lead management at your organization. It's funny, when I start working with some of our newer clients and they come to us and they feel like they've got some lead management problems, a lot of times they feel like lead management to them is just a big black box. They're doing everything they can to stuff the top of the waterfall with leads, with inquiries, and then some kind of magic happens somewhere down the line, and at the other end, these closed-won deals come out. And it's not entirely clear how all that happens. There's a lot of different activities that happen in between, and sometimes it looks like this, this crazy Rube Goldberg sort of conflagration of all these different activities that are happening inside the box. And when you start to look inside, it can be kind of hairy. I think if we advance this, we can see that looking inside this box, there are a million little things that happen. And we might have insight into some of them, but not really a cohesive way of understanding what all the different connections are and how one step leads to the next and how those deals get produced in the end. So when we talk about diagnosing what's going on in the lead management process, there's a few key questions that we want to ask. So first of all, we want to understand, where are we underperforming? So let's get insight into that black box. Let's understand this crazy set of activities that's going on in between driving leads and having closed deals. Where are the problem areas? And then if we can understand where we're underperforming, we can start to look at why. So we can start to do some root cause analysis. We can start to figure out what are the different activities, where are the activities going wrong, and then, of course, what can we do to fix it? So those are the three key questions that we're looking to address. Now, I want to start off just by level setting with everybody on the Sirius Decisions Demand Waterfall, and I know a lot of people in the industry use this as a standard. Some of you may not have seen this before. This is a shared view between sales and marketing of the health of demand creation. And some of you might be familiar with what I affectionately refer to as our Waterfall Classic, which was a much simpler depiction of how leads kind of make their way through the buyer's journey. A few years ago, we retooled it and we allowed for some more nuances to what actually happens in that process. So, with this version of the waterfall, we're able to see, for example, how marketing is sourcing leads versus maybe how the telequal team is sourcing leads and what that flow looks like, versus what the sales team themselves might be doing for generating leads and what that flow looks like. It also accounts for things like route arounds. You get that hot lead that comes in through a contact us form, may not necessarily have to go to a teleteam. You can route that right around to sales. So it's really kind of an advanced version of looking at everything that could potentially happen throughout the waterfall process. Now, the interesting thing is, about a year ago, we took another look at the demand waterfall, and we said, well, when you look at this, just visually, your eyes kind of go towards the stopping points, the different lead stages that the leads might end up in as they flow through. So they'll end up as an AQL, a TQL, SQL, etc. But there's another way of looking at the waterfall too, and that's as a process and as a series of steps that happen as the buyer goes through the buyer's journey. And so, what we did is we kind of turned the waterfall on its side a little bit and depicted it more as a set of processes with those lead stages as the inputs and outputs to each step. So if we go on to the next slide, we can take a look at what that looks like. So here's the waterfall again, and it's broken really into its four main component steps. So on the front end, we're going to receive in inquiries. We're going to evaluate that inquiry, with some sort of lead scoring tool, and coming out the other end, we're going to have an automation qualified lead. So we're evaluating whether that inquiry meets our scoring criteria, whether it's considered sales ready from a marketing perspective, and then we're going to send it on. Then it may go to a teleteam. Now, not every organization has a telequalification team, but many do. And so it'll go through that process where the lead gets further qualified. Coming out of there are the leads that are that came from marketing and now are qualified, and also the ones that the teleteam has generated themselves. The third step then is for sales to qualify the leads. Coming out of that are the sales qualified leads or early stage opportunities. And then finally, they're going to close the opportunity. So they're going to take that opportunity and follow it all the way through to the end. So it's the same idea, just a different way of looking at it. But the reason why I introduced this is that this view can be particularly helpful when you're trying to understand what's going on in the waterfall. And when you say, hey, we've got really low conversion rates, that was one of the top things at the poll at the beginning of the webinar that people were interested in. I've got bad conversion rates. What's going on? How do I start diagnosing what's going on? Well, this sort of view can be really helpful in taking a look at that. Now, when we think about the waterfall as a throughput process, throughput model, there are a few different metrics that we care about when we want to measure what's going on with the waterfall. And if we move to the next slide, we can see those three metrics are the number of leads that are flowing through, the number of leads and opportunities, so the volume, the conversion rate, so the efficiency with which we're having the leads flow through the waterfall, and also the velocity. Velocity, I think, is an interesting term. You never hear speed; it's always velocity. And if we go back to our science roots, velocity is actually speed with direction. So we want it to be speed, but we want it to be going in a certain direction towards those closed-won deals. So how quickly deals are working through the waterfall as well. There's actually a fourth, and that's the deal size. And if you're doing any kind of reverse waterfall analysis, you're going to want to factor in the deal size in terms of calculating how many leads you're going to need to work through, what conversion rate assumptions, and that sort of thing. The issue is, for practical purposes, you kind of don't know deal size when you're in the lead world. That sort of happens when you get down into opportunities. So you can certainly do it for planning purposes, but in terms of analyzing what's going on in the waterfall today, you really want to look at these three metrics. Now, when we start to look at the waterfall, a lot of organizations, like I said, just have this black box. They don't know what's going on. They've got to start to get visibility into what their waterfall looks like. And certainly they'll start with one waterfall, and they'll say, all right, let's capture this set of information in aggregate for our entire organization. So what do our conversion rates look like in aggregate? What is the velocity? What's the volume? That sort of thing. But it's really important to apply filters to that waterfall, and actually to have multiple waterfalls so that you can understand what the different slices of the business look like. And if we go to the next slide, we can look at a little bit about that. So, for example, we might start off with the overall waterfall, and then we might apply some filters. We can just build this slide out, a couple of builds that are on there. We may take a look at what are the audience profiles. So there are certain business units. They may have very specific waterfall conversion rates that are different from the aggregate, or geographies, or certain types of customers. Large versus small. Those are nuances that you want to start to get into. So again, if you're starting from scratch, start with the aggregate waterfall. That's a great place to start. But pretty soon after that, you're going to want to get away from those watered down averages and start looking in context at the different filters that make sense to you. Certainly you can apply a campaign filter as well. So how did this campaign do? Let's look at the velocity and the volume and the conversion rates for that. Or you may want to look at a certain period of time as well. So there are different types of filters that you're going to want to apply when looking at the waterfall. Now, it's all well and good to say, okay, well, how are we doing? What's our performance look like? What are our current conversion rates through the waterfall? But it doesn't really tell you a great story unless you have something to compare it to. And so at some point you want to introduce the idea of a benchmark. If you're converting at from inquiry to AQL at 50%, okay, it's 50%. Is that good or is it not good? I don't know. We need some kind of comparison to tell us whether that's good. So if we go on the next slide, one of the things to think about is when you're going out and looking for those benchmarks, there are a number of different factors that you have to think about that are going to move those benchmarks around a little bit. One of them is demand type, and this is the idea of whether your offering is considered a new concept, so it's something that hasn't even really ever existed before, and it's something that's completely new. Maybe it's a new paradigm, which is akin to, you've built a better mousetrap. Maybe people have some sort of solution in place for this, but you've got a different way of approaching it. Or you're looking at an established market where, essentially your offering is kind of a commodity, and so you've got to differentiate yourself in different ways. That impacts what that benchmark might look like. Customer type is another important one too. So, if you've got big customers versus small customers, you're going to have different conversion rates for those large whale deals that flow through the waterfall versus the transactional SMB deals. And so you wouldn't want to compare those two in the same way. And similarly, your go-to-market approach. You might have a channel reseller that, again, is dealing in volume. You're reserving sort of the key accounts, the account-based marketing approach for your internal sales force. And again, those are going to be different. And then certainly you want to look at what your peers are doing as well, and that's part of what we do at Sirius. As you may know, as a client, you gain access to the benchmarks of what your peer companies are doing. So companies that have a similar go-to-market approach, similar size, similar industry, that sort of thing, and we'll give you insight into what those benchmarks look like from waterfall perspective, so that you can level set a little bit and say, hey, are we a little bit ahead or behind the curve? But there are a number of things that are going to influence what those benchmarks will be. So, all right. So, how do we start diagnosing what's going on in the lead management process? Well, one of the things that we can do is we can take those. And we go on to the next slide. If we have a benchmark, then we can say, well, where are we relative to that benchmark? So, this is just an example. We'll take a look at the inquiry to AQL conversion rate. 41%, by the way, is not the industry benchmark. It's just a number we're using here as an example. But what we'll do is we'll say, all right, let's look at if 41% is the benchmark, what does our performance look like relative to that? If it's a lot higher than that, we're going to give it a capital letter A. If it's within 10% higher than that, we'll give it an A, but it's a lowercase a. And similarly, if the performance lags behind that, if it's within 10% less than that, we'll give it a lowercase b, and if it's a lot lower, we'll give it an uppercase b. And this is just it's just a set of symbols we'll use to help us understand a little bit more visually and a little bit quicker how far out of range we are away from the benchmark. So what we can do is we can take that then. Let's see how this might play out in an example. So on the next slide, we'll see we've got an example where we're looking at the total throughput for the waterfall. Okay, so this is inquiry all the way down to 1. So the very beginning to the very end. And our benchmark throughput conversion rate is 0.65%. Okay, so that's what we're striving for. Our current process shows that we're at 0.38%. So we're well below it. We're well below it. We're more than 10% below it. So we're going to give ourselves a capital letter B. So that's bad. We're not converting at as high a rate as we'd like to. And then as we start to break that down, we can look at the individual processes that make that up. So if we look at the macro function level now, we've built out, we can start to see how this stratifies a little bit. So we're going to break this now into the process of going from inquiry to TQL, and then from TQL to 1. So basically the marketing function and the sales function. We can see that, on the left, at inquiry to TQL, we're still way below where we want to be. We're at 5.7%. We should be at 10.7%. On the sales side of things, we're actually in pretty good shape. We're above the benchmark where we want to be and not too far above the benchmark. So that's good. Now if we break this down even further and we're just kind of decomposing these processes, decomposing the things that happen, we can build both of these out. We can see that on the left-hand side where our problem areas are. So in the automation qualification, we are way above our benchmark. And then when it comes to telequal, we're way below. And then when we get into the sales side of things seem to be moving along just fine. We've got a couple of lowercase a's, so we're above where we want to be from a benchmark perspective, but not too far above. So you can start off with an overall conversion rate and say, okay, well, we've got a problem, seems like we're not converting enough, and start to break it down into its individual piece parts. And then you can start to come up with a hypothesis and say, just looking at this, I might say, well, it looks like we're letting too many leads through up front. Our lead scoring is off a little bit. We're letting too many junk leads come through, and then the telequal team actually seems to be doing their job. They're taking those junk leads, but they're not letting them go through down to sales because the sales conversion rates are in good shape. They're filtering out those bad leads, and and that's where the buck stops. So that's good, but it's bad that they're having to deal with all these junk leads. So this is the way that you can start to diagnose what's going on, and we've developed a ton of research around this, where you can start to look at these almost from a Myers-Briggs personality perspective and say, okay, well, this is an ABAA pattern, and that suggests certain tendencies and certain remedies, and there might be, you know, a BBAA, etc. All the different patterns that potentially could play out. And I won't go through all of those on the webinar. We don't really have time. But just wanted to share a little bit of insight in terms of the approach and how you can start to break down what's going on with your waterfall.
Hey, John, this is Bonnie. I have a quick question. So I'm seeing a number here, 0.65%. I'm not sure if this actually comes from any particular industry or anything, but I've heard that the Sirius Decisions number for inquiry to close is 1.3%. But that was from a few years ago. Is that about right now?
Yes. Yeah. So that's a great question. These numbers again are just for illustration purposes, so don't walk away. Don't take the screenshot and say, "Hey, Sirius says this is what the waterfall conversion rate should be." Really, ultimately, it comes down to it's a matter of all those different factors we talked about in terms of what the appropriate benchmark is, either for your organization as a whole or for the slice of the business that you care about. So so it's hard to sit here and say here's what the industry conversion rate is, but it is something on that order. I mean, the idea is that from inquiry all the way down to 1, it is a pretty low rate. It's not 80%. It's a lot lower than that because of all the different hoops that you have to go throughout the buyer's journey.
So if you're a really young company, you probably have a much lower conversion rate. If you're more established, you might have a higher conversion rate.
Yeah, exactly. There are a number of factors like that. If you're playing into a market where people know you well, and and you just kind of have to serve yourself up, then you could expect that the conversion rates are going to be a lot higher. If you've got a new product, a new concept, and it's in a market where they don't know you, there's a lot of evangelism that has to go along with that, and so you can expect slower times, slower velocity through the waterfall, and also lower conversion rates as well.
Nice.
Okay, that's a great question, though. So in general, and this is, I'll move on to the next slide here, and just say, when you're looking at trying to figure out what's going on with your waterfall, this is basically a 5-step process. So the first one is what we just talked about. We spent a lot of time on identifying the patterns. So figure out what's going on. Where are the hot spots? Where are the bottlenecks? Where are the trouble areas? And then, just like we saw, just from those simple results, we can start to, formulate a hypothesis. Well, here's what I think might be going on, but the numbers are just a starting point. Then you've got to go to the business. You got to start talking to people and find out what's actually happening. Why are we seeing a spike on this side of the business and then things drop off over here? So you can assess what's going on from an activity and a process perspective. Either prove or disprove your hypothesis, and sometimes disproving it is just as valuable as proving it because you learn something. Of course, then you got to go back and figure out, what the real hypothesis is or what the real answer is, and then obviously take action to fix it. So, so pretty straightforward. But you'd be surprised at the number of organizations that don't take a very planful and organized approach to thinking about what's going on with their waterfall and diagnosing it. And the interesting thing to me is, and this is just the last point that I'll end on, and I'll give it back to you, Bonnie, is I think these days there's no excuse for not knowing what's going on inside your waterfall. The technology, like the Full Circle has to offer up, is absolutely available for you to have this insight and have this window, so that it doesn't have to be a black box. In fact, if we go on the next slide, just a kind of an analogy I'd offer up here is, years ago, from a healthcare perspective, we tried to figure out what was going on with people when they got sick, and we relied on things like the 4 humors, and so, they weren't hot enough, or they weren't dry enough, they weren't cold enough. It was these sorts of things. And what were the solutions? You can build this out as well. It was things like bloodletting, or trepanning, which is opening up the head and letting the bad stuff come out. I mean, pretty blunt tools, quite almost literally, at approaching the problems. But then we started to get more, pretty bad indeed. We started to get more insight into what was going on. So we had things like insight into, you could build this out too, into the antibiotics. What was going on inside the body? What were the different classes of antibiotics we could use against the different types of bacteria that were that were out there, and that was really helpful. And now today we've got insight into genetics and the human genome. And so, I think you can go have your test done and figure out what your genetic makeup looks like. So I think, ultimately the story here is, there have been advances in technology and the insight to understand what's going on, not just in healthcare, but in your waterfall. And there really is no reason why you can't apply these things and shouldn't be doing things to advance your demand creation processes. So that's all I have to share from an education standpoint. And then, Bonnie, I know you've got some really concrete examples to run through for everybody on the webinar as well.
Yeah, so I love this. This is great, a process. I love, that slide that you had, the 5 processes: identify patterns, evaluate hypotheses, assess processes, prove hypotheses, prove hypotheses, and then take action. So what I want to show everybody is actually how you can apply these ideas in some scenarios. But first, I need to introduce you to Full Circle a little bit and kind of why we started the company. So in our world, we work with companies, and I've worked with a lot of companies where the salespeople are using Salesforce, and then the marketing people are using a marketing automation system. And the problem that I've had over the years, and a lot of our customers have had, is that the data that's in Salesforce is different than the data that's in the marketing automation system. And the marketing people can't get the visibility they need as to what the heck happened to all the leads, and really understand how their lead life cycle is really working. And so that's why we built this app. It's built on the Salesforce platform. It's you can see here on this slide. It's built on the Salesforce App Cloud. So that the applications come with campaigns and leads and contacts and accounts and opportunities and lots of other things and dashboards and reports. Our app, it just runs right on that platform. So when you use the system, it's like it's another tab. It's another report, it's another dashboard right inside Salesforce. And we just take advantage of the current integrations that exist between all the popular marketing automation systems, including Pardot and Marketo and HubSpot and Eloqua, which is now Oracle Marketing Cloud, and Acton. And so we've built this analytics tool. It doesn't just do analytics, it actually manages the data inside Salesforce so it can work for marketing people. Okay, so what in the past, when I've done some of these webinars, I've taken some sort of strategic point of view, and I guess I'm kind of getting tired of that. So I just want to do something practical here, which is I want to take what John has presented and just show some examples of how you can actually do all this. The cool part about this is it's not rocket science, and you don't have to have a PhD in statistics or be a mathematician to actually do it. Anybody can do this. I think of the math as being, it's basically division and multiplication. So if you have a calculator, you can do this. You can do this, what I'm going to show you. Okay, so the first question is, how do I best create a demand gen budget? The second area is, how do we identify programs that really drive revenue, or the opposite? How do I identify bottlenecks that are preventing success? And I can't see the last thing because the GoToWebinar is covering it up. What is the last question? Okay, how do I get everybody on board? Okay, so the first thing I want to just discuss is the most common way that most marketing people are managing their marketing budget is by prioritizing based on the lead count. And so I just wanted to address this up front. This is something I think all of us actually know, even if you've actually never measured this. But we all know that we've run campaigns that have driven a lot of leads, but have not driven a lot of revenue. So we've all done this. We've teed up a lot of stuff, but none of it's actually turned into any deals. And so I want to just point this out that, and I may be saying, this may be obvious to many of you, but I want to point this out, which is, here we have the top performing campaigns by leads, which is, we had this is actually right out of our org. So we did a party, right, and we got 2,500 leads. And notice as you go down the list, you'll see demo requests is 210. But if you look at how if you prioritize the campaigns and just put them in order by what was actually driving revenue, you see that demo request is at the top. So if you prioritize your marketing budget based on number of leads, you're going to get a really, really different result than if you prioritize based on leverage revenue. And so this may be obvious to some of you, but I just wanted to point that out. Okay, so let's get started on these questions. Okay, so the first thing is the reverse funnel. So how do you best create a demand gen budget? So first you need to get the funnel data. So this is the kind of data that you need in order to actually do this. So you need to get your annual lead volume, the number of deals that have closed, the average deal size, the average sales cycle length, and the overall inquiry to close rate. Then the next thing you want to do is you want to set your goals for the new fiscal year. A lot of us are doing this or did this last month or are in the process of doing this right now. And in order to set your goals, you need to know what the sales goal is. Now, in a lot of companies, you may have a couple of different plans, right? What we're talking about is not the actual plan that you're telling your board or those projections. You're actually talking about what is the sum of the quotas for all the salespeople. So what is the number that the VP of Sales is being paid on? Then you want to look at what the average deal size goal is. Is that going to go up or down? And then the average sales cycle length goal. And then lastly is you want to calculate the number of leads required and establish a cost per lead so that you can actually create your budget. Okay. All right. So let's start with number one, getting the facts. Okay. Here's how you want to approach this. This is basic information that you can get in various places inside Salesforce. So you want to look at your annual lead volume, and I'm creating kind of a fictitious company that looks like a smaller software company. So if you work for a big company, just add a bunch of zeros, and it's the same thing. Okay. So annual lead volume is 21,885. In this particular case, of that lead volume, the number of deals that were actually closed was 256. The overall conversion rate, which is the number of deals divided by the lead volume, that's how you get your conversion rate, is 1.1%. And then the average deal size is about 74,000. Sales cycle length in this particular case is 90 days, and I just kind of used a sort of a round number there to make it easier for the math. And then the revenue, of course, is the number of deals times the deal size. So that revenue is 18.9 million this year. And then this year, marketing had a really tough time. They had to generate 100% of all the leads. So that's that may or may not be the case in your company. So the question is, how do you get these facts? So this is the source of all this information. So you can get your annual lead volume right out of Salesforce, and Full Circle has awesome reports on this. And the number of deals closed, again, it's a volume. These are volume metrics. When you're looking at the funnel, you have volume, velocity, and conversion type metrics. So Salesforce and Full Circle, again, I'll show you a report on this. And then the overall conversion rate is Salesforce and Full Circle. You can just get the average deal size right out of Salesforce and do a report and figure that out. You may have to export it into Excel and do a little manipulation there. Or you might have a report that does that, or a formula field in Salesforce that'll calculate that for you. Then you have sales cycle length, of course. That is a velocity metric, and again, Salesforce Full Circle can provide you that, as well as number of deals and deal size, that revenue that can be pulled out as well from Salesforce and Full Circle. And then lastly, this percentage of leads from marketing, that's an agreement, right? That's an agreement that you have between the marketing team and the sales team and the CEO and CFO. What is marketing going to contribute in terms of sourcing leads? And should it be 100%? Probably not. The sales team often will source many of their own leads, and also there's oftentimes companies have, like we have, an SDR team, sales development reps, that are out hunting for leads and demos. Okay, so building next year plan. So we've got this year's plan, and then we want to fill in the blanks for next year. So just starting from the bottom, So in our agreement, we got the CEO to agree to marketing doing 50% of the leads, not 100% this year. That's good. That's a win. Then in terms of revenue, the number that the sales VP is being comped on, so that's the number that you're trying to shoot for, is 30 million. And then sales cycle length is 90 days. It was decided that this company couldn't decrease that. And then the average deal size is about 75,000. It's going to stay about the same. But the idea is we want to get more efficient. In this case, I'm kind of basing this on kind of a software model, which, as I understand, the Sirius Decisions benchmark is about 1.3%. So I just used that number. So then we want to calculate number of deals closed and annual lead volume. So of course, the number of deals is to take that revenue and divide it by the deal size. That'll get you the number of deals. And then once you have the number of deals, you can divide it by the conversion rate, that 1.3%, and then multiply it times the percentage that you need to generate from marketing, and you'll get the number of leads. So here's a report from Full Circle that is very helpful in pulling together this kind of information. So you can see here SQL1 is 138. That's down in that gray part. See that gray bar? See 138 is kind of in the middle of the slide to SQL1. So that's the number of deals in this particular period of time. And then you can also see this is kind of a simplified funnel. John referred to it as the Waterfall Classic. So inquiry, MQL, SAL, SQL, SQL1. And so you can see the volumes in each of these phases, and then you can see the conversion rates from stage to stage. So you can get the overall conversion rate, of course, by taking the number of deals won divided by the inquiry. That's it. You get that number. Okay, so building next year's plan, we've got, we divide up the revenue by the deal size. You get the number of deals, which is 400. And then you get the number of deals divided by the conversion rate multiplied times the percentage from marketing to get the number of leads, and it's 15,384. Okay, so now what? So that's the number of leads on an annual basis, but you don't want to just run on that annual number. You kind of want to have some intermediate goals. So the way we do it, and the way a lot of people do it, is just have you might have a monthly or a quarterly goal. So let's do it quarterly. And so in this particular case, we've divided that 15,000 up, and you'll notice that it's not equally distributed among all the quarters. So you can see in Q1 the goal is 2,000, Q2 is 6,000, Q3 is 2,000 again, and then Q4 is 5,000. In this particular case, in this hypothetical company, Q1 and Q3 are a little weaker just from seasonality. That's expected, and then Q2 and Q4 typically are stronger for lead gen programs. Okay, so but what about these Q4 leads? Are they, since the sales cycle is 90 days, most of that's going to be closed in Q1 of the following year. So how do we resolve this? So the way you want to resolve it is you want to look at the Q1 of the previous year, so Q1 of 2015, and in 2015, say we generated 3,000 leads. So we've revised the Q1 number to add 2,000 to it, so it went from 2,000 to 4,000. So what happens is the overall lead gen number for 2016 needs to be 17,000, not 15,000. And then, of course, you can convert that into a budget. And this is the part where you kind of estimate your cost per lead. You might have some numbers from last year. Say it's $100. Then that's a budget of 1.7 million. And when you get that budget number, then that's when you want to talk to the CMO and the CFO and just make sure you're not, I would say smoking dope, but I'm not sure if that's appropriate for the webinar. But if you're crazy or not, and that might actually fit into your budget. And so then that's when you need to work out. Okay, like so maybe conversion rates need to be adjusted. Maybe cost per lead needs to go down. So these are things that you can plan and work through. Okay, so that was the concept of developing a budget. So how do you identify programs that drive revenue? Well, I showed you this slide previously, and I just want to emphasize again. Understanding which campaigns are actually impacting sales is the best way to prioritize your campaigns. And in this particular instance, this list of campaigns, these 10 campaigns, we're a small company. We ran 50 campaigns last year, so there's a lot more underneath this. And so we would want to, look at all of those campaigns and look at the effectiveness. Of course, cost per lead is very important on this as well, so you want to take that into consideration as well. Next, I want to talk a little bit about identifying bottlenecks. And again, I really like the Sirius Decisions methodology. So here's how we would kind of approach this. So these are obviously Sirius Decisions waterfall stages. This is SAL, Sales Accepted Lead. And then this on the right-hand side, you see Marketing Qualified Lead, so an MQL. And what's going on here, you see some dates. Okay, this chart's a little old from 2013, so please forgive me. But you can see that just the number of SALs is going up. But then if you look at the MQO count, it's actually holding steady. So what's going on here? In this particular case, something's quite awry, where you have, okay, the SAL is going up, and then all of a sudden it falls off a cliff. So why would that be? So this is an opportunity actually to investigate what's going on. So so the first step of what these charts do is they help you identify those patterns, and then you need to do that investigation and assess the processes. What's happening in the marketing and sales lead handoff? This is an opportunity to talk to sales and the sales management and try to figure out what's going on. So we had a customer that had a small sales team that's focused on small, and then another team that's focused on medium, and then they had another sales team that focused on enterprise. And the small and the large, the MQLs were going up, and the SALs were all going up. So that was good. So it seemed like the marketing and sales teams were tracking. But in the mid-market, something happened where the SAL count just went down a great deal. And so they saw this, and so they went over to find out what was going on. And it turned out that the sales VP had told the sales reps not to follow up on any marketing leads that were coming over. I mean, that was the directive. So the salespeople, of course, were doing that, and so of course the SAL count was going down like crazy. So that is a real life example of something that could happen, and there's lots of other things that could possibly happen as well. But having a tool that actually identifies the issues is really helpful, so that you can actually engage in those conversations. So the next thing is, how do you get everybody on board? So the first thing is you want to show the data that you have now. It's really valuable for a company and all parts of the company to just really understand what data that you have now, and then really explain the method that you're using to set goals and really overachieve on those goals over time. The third thing that really helps get everybody on board is really track your progress against the goals and talk about it. So show those reports and dashboards routinely in every meeting that you do. So if you've got a weekly meeting, you don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but as long as you flash it up, people know that the management and everybody's looking at these charts, and it's something to be taken seriously. And then the last thing that I want to encourage is embracing transparency. So this is really hard for some companies, but if you can do it, it really is great. If you can allow everyone, as many people as possible, to see these charts in Salesforce, it's super, super helpful, because lots of people can have good ideas or can spot issues and help try to fix those issues. And if you have, the more brains you have working on it, the better. So I recommend to folks really embrace transparency. It really, really works well. And it also allows you to engage with sales so much better than if you are, are shy about and hiding what the results are. It's much better to be transparent with the sales team so that you both can work together. Nobody's perfect. They're not perfect at closing sales, and the marketing team isn't perfect at generating good leads. So as long as you're working to get better, that's the main idea. When Jim Harbaugh was the coach of the 49ers, he he was in, of course, he was the football coach for Stanford, and then when he came to the 49ers, he had this thing that he would try to get his guys to do, which every day, if you can be 1% better, then we're going to have an awesome team. And I think that's really the secret, is if we focus on just getting better and becoming high-performance marketers, we can get better and get a little bit better every day. And embracing transparency is a really good start and a great way to get going. So that is all I have to say today. I'd love to take some questions if you guys have questions. Let's see.
Hey, Bonnie, this is John. I would just add, as you start to look at some of the questions that may have come in, I wholeheartedly agree on that transparency piece. And I know it's easier said than done, especially if you're at an organization that doesn't really value that kind of transparency. But I mean, I can tell you, as a practitioner, it was the same sort of situation. And the hardest conversation you have to have is when you don't have much insight into what's going on, and you come back with that first set of numbers, and everything looks pretty ugly. Some groups look bad. The conversion rates are way lower than you'd want. You see these weird spikes and fall-offs like you just demonstrated, and just know that that's the toughest part of it. And then from there, it gets better, and you can almost take solace in the fact that in a way, you want things to look bad at first, because then it's easier to get that 1%, 1%, 1% as time goes on. You can start to look like a hero as time goes on, and you start to fix things. So just know that that first reveal of what's going on can be the hardest conversation, but it really positions you to do well in the future.
Cool. I agree. So I have a question for you, John, and this is actually my question. We have some other ones that I'm going to be selfish and tee my question at first. Okay. So my question is, when you talk about the route around, I'm interested in what you're seeing in companies. So this is when the lead comes in and it's a special lead. Maybe it's an account that's assigned to a special strategic account group or something like that, and the lead gets forwarded directly to sales. At our company, we still have our SDRs actually call that person to set a demo, and we think that it's just saving time, which is just an interaction, because the person is requesting a meeting, and with the team, and so we actually have the SDRs do that, not have the salespeople do that, just for efficiency's sake. Is that a good practice or a bad practice?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think in your situation, you figured out what the next logical step tends to be in those situations. So they want the meeting. You don't want to burden the sales team with setting up that meeting. That's part of what the SDRs can do. So it's kind of I'd say it's almost a hybrid route around, where you're routing it past the normal telequalification process, but you're accelerating it to get it in front of sales as quickly as possible. So that's a great refinement on that. And as you would document your waterfall process, that's a process step that you would add in there. And then the key is, of course, to be able to identify from a systems perspective when those situations exist and who the SDR is that gets that lead, so that you can treat those efficiently and quickly, because those are some of the hot leads.
Okay, cool. All right, so that's helpful. Thank you. All right, I have another question here. And this is also for you, John. You listed a number of factors that can influence the benchmarks. Where do I start?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it seems like there can be a lot of different things that are impacting where my benchmark lands, and so how do I even know which of those are the most important or which ones to use? One of the best places to start is just historical performance. So you may not have access to peer benchmark data. You might know that there's some split between your bigger customers and your SMB transactional customers and how they flow through the waterfall. You don't really know what the benchmark is per se. So I would say start with your historical performance. That's not necessarily representing the ideal, It's just where you've been. But almost to your get 1% better point, a lot of us will work on, in the annual planning process, percentage improvements over last year. And so I think, you can start to take a look at that and say, well, do we feel like things kind of went along pretty smoothly through the process based on what we did last year? Our gut probably tells us we know where some problem areas are. So you can start with historical performance, and then certainly if you can get access to your peer set data, that's really the best way to do it. And be as nuanced as you can about the slice of the business. Take big cuts. If you know EMEA is vastly different from the North America, make a cut there. But those would be the two places to start. I'd say look at your historical data and then try and get access to peer information as well.
Okay, cool. And then I have one more question for you.
Yeah.
And I like this one. Aren't higher conversion rates always better? Wouldn't I want 100% conversion rate through every process?
Yeah, ideally, sure. It wouldn't be this svelte waterfall. It would be a cylinder, right? Everything would just drop right to the bottom. Ideally, I mean, any kind of throughput process, you want to have 100% conversion and speeds as high as possible and that sort of thing. But the reality is, like you said, marketing isn't perfect about serving up leads that are ready to close in an instant, and sales isn't perfect with their process. So, knowing that there are going to be some defects in a sense, you know that the waterfall is going to have some sort of attenuation. It's going to have some sort of drop-off. So certainly you want to strive for higher and higher conversion rates, but you also want to be careful, like the example we talked about. When you're passing too much through at a certain stage, that can be a sign of a bad thing. Maybe your lead scoring isn't working as well as it should, or your telequal team is just blindly accepting leads, and not actually seeing if they met the criteria that was agreed to with marketing. So in general, yeah, you want to start creeping up all those conversion rates, but be careful of the big spikes, because those are usually red flags more than anything.
Yeah. So one of the things I've noticed in a lot of companies is from year over year, say you're going through a big growth spurt, and the marketing team is expanding rapidly and trying to generate a whole bunch more leads than the previous year.
Yep.
I've noticed that in those years where the business is growing even more rapidly than the previous year, that the conversion rates actually go down.
Right.
Have you noticed this, and is that normal, and what's the story with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a couple of things. Part of it is, ideally up front, sales and marketing get together and they decide on what a sales-ready lead is. I'm using air quotes here. You can't use me, but you can't see me. But what a lead, what characteristics it needs to have to be able to be passed to sales. And I think as the business changes and you go through sometimes that hockey stick growth, sometimes that changes, or you get into new markets and that changes. So you need to be able to revisit that. And then sometimes there are just really practical things, like the telequal team or the inside sales team just gets overloaded with leads. You run a big campaign, there's a big group of leads that comes in, they can't deal with them all, human nature, they kind of ignore some of them or let some of them just kind of pass through because they can't deal with volume. Maybe they're under some kind of constraint in terms of the number of leads they're supposed to be processing every day or every week. And that just happens. So that inverse relationship absolutely happens. And so you have to try and get out ahead of it, know when those big spikes in leads are coming, and then also, if you're seeing significant shifts in the business or you're going into a new territory, that sort of thing, keep an eye out for that because you may need to revisit the lead level definitions.
Cool. Thank you. Hey, well, it's like 5 minutes before the hour, and I'm sure everybody on the phone has to get to their next meeting, so I think we should probably wrap up.
Okay.
So So I want to thank you, John, for joining us for this webinar, and invite everybody to join us. John and I will definitely be there at the Sirius Decisions Summit in May, so join us there. And on April 11th, Full Circle is hosting its high performance marketing conference called Circulate. That's a play on Full Circle. And April 11th in San Francisco at the W Hotel. So hopefully we'll see all of you there. So, John, with that, thanks very much, and I hope to see you soon.
Yeah, thank you, Bonnie. I really enjoyed it. Thanks, everybody, again, for tuning in.
All right. Bye for now.